Well, we'll start off the conversation here on News Central's The Ballot Nigeria with our guest who's joining us very quickly. He is a political analyst. Nelson Ekujimi joins us. Thank you so much for being here, and good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Good morning. Happy Sunday.
Thank you. It seems like you went to church this morning.
Well, I couldn't. I was monitoring the election developments.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Just
well, anyway,
like you are doing over there.
Well, on my way to work, I did see a few people coming out from the church. Some moving into church, and I was like, oh, okay, all right.
While some people actually just stayed at home, because while I was coming, the roads were quite empty. So some people are still afraid of. Are you sure we should still come out? Probably we should just stay at home and praise the Heavenly Father and monitor.
I mean, that's the reason why we're here for you, to ensure that we bring to you up to speed and the latest stories. Don't forget, we do have our correspondents who will be joining us in the course of this discussion. But let's go straight into it. First of all, a die is cast, like they would say in another English explanation, or better still, the deed has been done, although we're hearing that there are differences in different parts of the country. Let's start off first with your view of the elections from yesterday up until today.
The election has come and gone in some areas, while in some areas we are going to have the rescheduled elections, like in Bayelsa State, where INEC couldn't conduct election in 141 polling units because of violence that made the INEC officials to flee for their lives. And from the reports, when they were remobilized to go to the venue, the ad hoc staff of INEC expressed fear for their life, and based on security review and consideration, the election was scheduled for today. So by and large, the election has been peaceful majorly. We've had pockets of violence. We've had reports of election materials and personnel arriving at polling stations at about 10 a.m. instead of the polling station to have opened officially at 8:30 a.m. But if you look at it, I think INEC has done well, except for this area of logistics that reoccurred again. But how well this has affected the election, I think we'll wait for further developments. But one thing you cannot run away from: we didn't expect a perfect election, knowing that this election has been conducted by human beings, and this election also involves the participation of human beings who cannot but exhibit the humanness in them, trying to be smarter than one another. And like we say, there's no perfect election anyway. So I think we should give ourselves a big kudos. I don't think the level of issues we have seen is enough, to distract from the integrity of the process, because likely in most areas the election was, peaceful. And if you look at the Constitution, it requires that the election must be conducted in substantial compliance with the electoral law. It didn't say total, because the framers of the Constitution knew that there can be nothing like total. That's why it said substantial. That is the issues, if they are not enough, to warrant, the integrity of the process. So I think we have done well. But we can do better.
Definitely we can do better. And Nels, now stay with you for quite a bit right now. And when we talk about pockets of violence, I mean, no elections in 141 polling units in Bayelsa State. That's quite a whole lot. But while we talk about pockets of violence, we wonder, there were security agencies who were posted to all these particular areas. I mean, how would you assess their conduct and commitment to make sure that such situations are truncated and prevention of violence during the elections?
Well, again, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I think this opportunity has afforded us an avenue to educate and sensitize ourselves on the provisions of the Electoral Act. The provisions of the Electoral Act does not allow security agents, to come into the vicinity of polling armed. We saw policemen in some polling stations yesterday. In some places, you had just one. In some places, report we had was that there were even no security agencies on ground, but the people themselves were determined that they were going to conduct elections, and they conducted it peacefully. I witnessed situations where we were at polling stations, and when we started, I'm talking about Ali Mosho, where we started, and the electoral officer, a youth copper, had to admonish the people, because before he started the process, he made, the briefing, which is in tandem with the rules that, the people must be inundated with the process. And he appealed to them and told them that, look, gentlemen and ladies, we are supposed to be the ones guiding our democracy and not some security agencies' arms. Because ordinarily, election should be the festival of voters. It should be where we should all go, cast our vote peacefully, and whoever wins, we carry on with our lives. Because in most of the communities where elections took place, the people that came out to vote are people whose daily lives, intermingle. They go to the same church, they worship in the same mosque, they go to the same pub, they buy from the same supermarket, so they know one another. So why do we have to, turn election into war? When the minute after election, we are back to our normal lives, where our children are playing with one another. So the result of security agencies, they were very, very professional. They didn't interfere with the process. And if violence have occurred, we must take cognizance of the fact that the violence has occurred because we, the people, have refused to play by the game, play according to the rules. So it is not about, because when you talk about violence, was the violence committed by security agencies? They were committed by our friends, by our brothers, by our children. So it means we, as a people, we have failed in training these people who have become anti-democratic elements in the right way. A lot of times we commit, wrongs in the upbringing of our children, and we put the blames on security. If everybody trains his or our child, or we imbibe the right values from the home, the security agencies will have little or nothing to do.
So, what you're saying right now is that there's a collective responsibility for every one of us. I mean, for all the stakeholders, both as citizens, as INEC officials, as security agencies. But I'm coming back to you in quite a while, but I want to bring now Bashir Badr as a lawyer and a political analyst. And for the better part of today, we've been looking at assessing the elections of yesterday. Right now, we're having, unfortunately, we would have expected that yesterday voting would have ended. But right now, we're seeing re-election. As I said, 141 polling units in Bayelsa State and some areas in Lagos State where elections were not conducted. And one of the major reasons why, apart from violence, was the late arrival of INEC officials and so many hitches on the beavers, which a lot of people were expecting will make the elections more credible. So what's your assessment and what's your expectation for today in the areas where we're going to have a re-election?
I probably will start by saying that the latter part of the speech or the address I heard from the gentleman there shows that we just have to celebrate that we have conducted a very peaceful elections, because the expectation of the law, like I said, is a substantial compliance, and we have substantially complied. So places where the elections will be conducted today are probably due to logistics. We don't even have the statistics of where violence was more than the delay in arrival of electoral materials. So for those who had issues with electoral materials in delivery, then today we expect just like it was freely conducted yesterday, it will be freely conducted today too. So our expectation today is that by this time tomorrow, we should be expecting that announcement of results will have commenced from INEC office. I think this is my expectation.
Go back to you, Mr. Nelson. Let's look at the voting patterns that we did see. Rita has alluded to it in terms of the beavers. It's not being functional, especially in certain areas. And then, of course, looking at the fact that some wards started pretty late when it came to vote and the likes. Let's look at how this could affect the results, or could it further delay INEC from announcing results concurrently? Over to you, Mr. Nelson.
Yes, the late arrival of polling materials and INEC officials to the polling stations really will delay the announcement of results, because ordinarily, if the INEC officials had arrived on time and polling opened at 8:30 a.m. as stipulated, whether the people are many or not, one would have expected that by 6 p.m. at worst, elections would have been concluded in most polling stations. But here we had a situation whereby even as at 3 a.m., elections were still being conducted in some polling stations in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. So it is a fact that the socio-economic reality of our situation today might have been responsible for the late arrival of INEC at those polling stations. Then, with regards to the beavers, you and I know very well that nothing made by man can never be perfect. So the glitches that we have observed with regards to the beavers, I'm not sure. I don't have the statistics of the percentage of beavers, malfunctioning in the polling stations. But like I said earlier on, until we get this fact, then we'll be able to take, a concrete, assessment of how far the beavers has performed, whether well or poorly, in the conduct of this election.
All right, thank you so much, Nelson. I'm going to bring in Bashir into all of this. Still on INEC and the expectations that people expected, especially with the introduction of more technology voting patterns, the beavers, and of course, uploading of the results by INEC. Now, this caused quite an uproar in the late hours of yesterday, and even this morning, people complaining when the elections were quite in a very long stage that they have not started seeing INEC uploading the results. Later on, we started seeing, but this has caused quite uproar with people saying that why was there late, why were the results uploaded late by INEC? And some people were even alluding to the fact that there's been some kind of hanky-panky with the elections results uploading on the INEC server. So what do you have to say to this?
Well, you see, I smile because this is the attitude of an average Nigerian. The anticipation, the over-anxiety, and the rest of them. Why are we not always very patient and await the system? It is because of our own handiworks. We are always afraid of our own works because those who have played games were like, okay, let my game sail first before every other thing changes. If it is not coming on time, then probably they would have discovered our game somewhere and they quickly wanted to make noise and say, the system is already delaying so that they can read, so that they can play games. Why are we always like this? It is not every time we've witnessed in this world where the United States of America, the giant United States of America, conducted the election and counted for 4 days. Not too long. They are ahead of us in technology. They are ahead of us in everything. But what happened? And there were no speculations from that end that, it is because they wanted to read. It is because they wanted to. No.
But Bashir, sorry to interrupt. Can you actually blame the citizens looking at what happened, disruption at the polling centers by thugs? Would you blame them for actually being worried that these results were not uploaded on time? I mean, it's normal human behavior to actually be tense that probably the results might be tampered with.
Thank you. Let me just adopt what Nelson said earlier. These same people that created the suspicion we are raising now are you and me. Those who patronize the same market, who worship at the same mosques and churches, and the rest of them are the same set of people. The same policemen that we expected that, why would they not have acted? Were also part of us. They're just wearing uniform and they wanted to be official as much as they could to comply with the system. So, yes, the anxiety may be necessary. Why? Because of our own handiwork. The delay was not occasioned by the failure of the system to have the election conducted on time. No, the delay was occasioned because of the past governance that cumulated into this delay. Yesterday, don't forget, we mentioned that the road to some places are so bad that before they get there, it will take time. And those who are waiting to receive them there too knew that they can't come on time. And those of us who are just observing from afar will be complaining about things we were not privy or beneficial to see.
All right.
I think this is one where we get it all wrong.
Okay.
Our patience needs to be worked. Yes, We cannot just sit and say, okay, let's watch, and while things are going wrong underneath, but our suspicions are just too loud to be tolerated.
All right, Mr. Bashir, thanks so much for those points. But I think we've talked enough about the INEC officials and the ad hoc staff and the likes who were actually getting late to the polling units. But let's take a look at some of the INEC staff or the ad hoc staff who, in one way or the other, many have said have been compromised. There was a video. I'm hoping that our producers can actually sort that out and also share with you videos of violence where somewhere in the east, while over more than 8,000 people, according to the statement, were waiting outside to vote, unbeknownst to them, the INEC staff and, of course, allegedly police officers were inside thumbprinting for a particular political party. Aside that, we also heard of different scenarios where, while that was going on in the east, there was also a scenario of a lady who was caught. And she said she's sorry. They said, what do you want to say to INEC and to the people of Nigeria? I think that polling unit, they were very, very calm and nice. Just as Bashir has also said, and like some of our guests said yesterday, that there seems to be a momentum of calmness. They didn't do anything to her. They just told her, you know what, you're on camera. What do you have to say? It was obvious she was actually scribbling and cancelling the results and then adding it to the other party, probably thinking that the cameras would not come close. But they did, and they spotted her and they caught her. Now, let's talk about the personnel itself. They arrived late, that's fine. The personnel, what do you make out of that? Personnel's acting quite differently from what they should. What does the commission say? What does the law say? And what should Nigerians expect to be done to such people, being an analyst yourself? Let me start with you, Mr. Bashir.
Yes, you see, yesterday I mentioned that most of these incidents we have had in the past. But the problem has always been that once these elections are concluded and results are eventually announced, irrespective of inadequacies attendance these elections, you don't get to hear about the malpractices again, except for where particular party who had expected that, oh, no, they cannot win that environment because of our influence in court. Now, they go to court. That is when they begin to prosecute A, to prosecute B. By the tribunal, some individuals will have been identified who will make confessional statements as to committing this crime. What do we do to them? Nothing. You don't get to hear that those who participated in electoral malpractices have been judged in this country. So we need to step up our games. We need to look at the laws again and do a lot of amendments on some provisions of our laws. Otherwise, we will just continue to have a repeat of what we are having over and over again. Like we're not learning anything from this.
Okay, I'm going to throw that question also back to Nelson because I want your opinion of that, because we also saw some videos where some people were actually helping people to vote, some INEC officials. Let's look at the training of the INEC staff and the ad hoc staff. I mean, from your assessment of the election, how well would you say that they were trained to make sure that they maintain all the standards, the rules, and the integrity of being an umpire for this election? Mr. Nelson, can you hear me?
All right.
Okay, come again, please come again. I didn't know you were talking to me.
Okay, wonderful. We're looking at the integrity of the INEC and the ad hoc staff. Yes, there were also some videos, apart from the ones that we saw, that that the INEC staff were actually helping people to vote. Let's look at the training for the integrity of INEC and ad hoc staff. From your assessment, how well would you say that they were able to perform two of the rules of being an umpire for this election?
Well, thank you very much once again. I think, please, can you quickly allow me to respond to some of the questions you asked Mr. Bashir?
All right,
one is that the essence of the media is to educate, is to inform, and sensitize the citizenry. You talked about some INEC personnel who were caught for electoral malfeasance. You should expect that with the number of ad hoc staff INEC employed, to carry out these election responsibilities, you don't expect every one of them, to be law-abiding. There will be people who want to, circumvent the law. But the truth of the matter is that whoever is found, culpable, should be made to go through the full process of the law. Then you talked about, the people who have alleged that results were not uploaded. For crying out loud, there is no party that has submitted, registration for party agents whom, after election must have been concluded, will not be given a copy of the result sheets. So long as you have the result sheets with you, that is the legitimate right to the results of the election. A lot of these people crying over the uploading of results are just trying to incite us anyway, because you can't give what you don't have. A lot of Nigerians don't have trust in themselves, so they cannot trust anybody. And that is why you have all this crisis here and there. There are procedures, in the conduct of the election. Even as a candidate, the law stipulates that if you have lost and you are aggrieved, there are channels for you which you should explore. You are talking about somebody who is completing. The electoral law is very clear. Without the accreditation by beavers, you cannot vote. So anybody who has done that has embarked on an exercise in futility. What people should do, what we should educate people to do, is that in such situations where you see whether INEC or any other person has circumvented the law, let us put it in writing and make a formal complaint. Because the law says if you are not accredited, you cannot vote. So that person who is thumbprinting, which beavers machine will he bring as authentication of the voters that he thumbprinted for? So it's a wasteful effort. So we owe ourselves this responsibility to educate people who want to incite us against one another. The laws are very, very clear. We must be ready to play according to the laws of the land and not resort to self-help, which was what we saw in most of these cases.
Okay, Bashir, when we talk about the law now, Electoral Act offenders, I mean, what exactly does the law say? I know you're a lawyer, so you would have more expertise on things like that. For electoral offenders, for especially erring INEC officials, what exactly does the law stipulate? Bashir, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you very clearly.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Yes, I may not have specific sections now to quote, but I know very clearly that Electoral Act will prescribe specific punishments for various offences committed under the Electoral Act. So this is the area I have always mentioned very specifically, that despite the provisions of the law, the provision of Electoral Act, if you commit an electoral fraud, there is a stipulated punishment for it. How well have these sections functioned well? How well have we executed this? How well has this law actually shown to Nigerians that these individuals who participated in social elections, social year, have now been punished for social offences because of their running foul of the law? So the law is clear, except I just checked my library now to pick out the electoral law and cite the sections directly. Otherwise, I may not be able to give you direct provisions offhand now.
All right. Anyway, thank you so much. These points are indeed points that Nigerians are indeed looking forward to hear, to see what the outcome would be. But don't forget, reports reaching us is that there will be an address, especially from INEC in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, a few minutes away from now, and hopefully we'll get to hear what the information will be saying, especially from the INEC boss himself, Professor Mahmood Yakubu. But let's quickly go straight into our views of one more thing. Let's look at the election violence as well. What are your thoughts, especially for you, Mr. Nelson, looking at the fact that a few days to go, we did see security operatives drive around different states, Lagos, Abuja, some parts of the east, and so on. And yet, we also did hear of cases where violence erupted, and a lot of people did have a case to file, especially with the way that INEC officials were actually scattered about. What's your thought on that? Nelson, are you there?
Well, I condemn violence in its entirety. I'm here with you if you can hear me.
Go ahead, please.
I condemn violence in its entirety. It is not something that we should be proud of because it is a dent on our humanity as a people. It does not speak well of our democracy if at this age and time we still see some of us resorting to self-help, in actualizing our selfish interest. But be that as it may, you recognize that the geography of Nigeria is such that we don't have security personnel who are commensurate with the number of citizens. According to the United Nations statistics, we are supposed to have one policeman to about 400 persons. But in Nigeria today, as we speak, Nigeria, we have an estimated population of over 200 million. And for now, the number of a policeman to the citizens is about one policeman to about 600 citizens, which grossly tells you that we are actually under-policed. So what we need to do is to up our security ante. And when I'm talking about our security ante, I'm not talking about the security agencies alone. I'm talking about the citizenry. We need to make the citizens aware that they also have a responsibility to protect themselves. And protecting themselves means being the eyes and the nose and the ears of the security architecture. A situation where you see security lapse and your attitude is that it doesn't concern me, after all, it's not happening to me. It's unacceptable. So the violence you have seen is in tandem with human nature. Man by nature, evil is man's second nature. Man will always commit sin. But the responsibility of us as a society to make sure anybody who violates the laws of the land, faces the music squarely. And that is where we are all failing. A lot of times when security agencies apprehend suspects, the complainants, they don't come up, with their own side of the story to ensure that the culprits are prosecuted. And like in law, where there's no complainant, there's no case. We have seen cases where somebody was robbed, the police arrested the robber, and they called the person who was robbed that, please come. We have arrested the criminal that attacked you yesterday. And the complainant just tells them, look, since I've discovered my purse, since I've recovered my ATM, I don't want to do anything again. That tells you clearly that there's a lacuna between the citizenry and the security architecture. And that is where we need to, really look into our relationship.
Okay. Mr. Nelson, sorry to barge in. While you were talking, the video was showing. We'd just like to put that video up. We'd also like to announce that News Central does not in any way condone violence or no support violence. But this was one of the polling units in Abuja there. This was one of the situations that took place where the INEC staff and, of course, members of the security operatives were in that building thumbprinting while the amount of these voters were outside waiting endlessly. And before you knew it, it was fracas everywhere, fighting here and there and the likes. From your standpoint as a lawyer, Mr. Bashir, do you think this polling unit should have a re-election and should actually have its result scattered? Right now on social media, many people are saying that sadly, if nothing is done, the results that will come out from this place will go straight up into the INEC portal. So what are your thoughts from INEC, and should there be a re-election? As you can see there, the violence was indeed one that nobody would wish upon himself.
That's right. Yes, you see, the video is a reflection of who we are. Unfortunately, not entirely who we are. But going to your question, what should we do? What should INEC do with respect to this type of this unit, especially? The law is clear about that. Where there is violence, it is either the result of that unit is cancelled or a re-election date is announced, so that you don't disenfranchise everyone. If you look at the number of people around that area, barely maybe around 150, 200 people, just estimation. The number of voters in that unit may not be just that 200 people, maybe more. And not all of them participated in this violence. So to disenfranchise all of them is against the law. It is not the law. The law is the election at that unit is cancelled and the election date is announced. This is it's like having issues with logistics too. This is an environment that what the law also stipulates is that individuals involved in these electoral malpractices are to be apprehended and to face the wrath of the law. Mr. Hanson just mentioned, we have seen people participating in this crisis now.
Yeah.
We want to identify faces. We want to identify faces so that we can put them before the law. We want to, even from amongst them, we want to have witnesses that will come and say, yes, I was there, this is what I saw, this is what I saw. You won't find anybody. Even the complainant will not show up, let alone those we think will be our witnesses, so as to ensure that justice is served. In this case, you won't find them. So what else would the law do? They said they sat on that matter and nothing happened afterwards. We are the nothing that happened afterwards.
Okay. All right, now, Bashir, I'm going to look at the voting patterns that we saw so far. Now, from what we have, that the affected areas where there's going to be re-election, we have about 16 states: Lagos, FCT, Ebonyi, Rivers, Imo, Anambra, Kano, Edo, Delta, Kogi, Bayelsa, Enugu, Sokoto, Taraba, Abia, Ekiti. I remember when we were discussing yesterday, earlier on when the election just started, where we saw a large turnout of voters in Kano, and we also know the importance, especially the amount of people in the North Central, when you're looking at voting patterns from previous elections, the amount of people that will come out. Looking at the regions, I mean, how would you place the level of violence in the southern areas, in the northern areas, in the western areas? Because we're seeing, it looks like there's more pockets of violence and more of re-election in the southern areas. I mean, how will you place the voting patterns, the voting trends, and the electoral violence trends in these particular regions?
You see, when I heard that Kano was involved and there's going to be re-election in some areas in Kano, I was amazed. I started making findings whether there was any violence in any of the polling stations in Kano. No. The only thing that happened was the late arrival of logistics in some areas, and this, raised agitations, and people were just like protesting, sort of. But that there were electoral violence in Kano, it will be a very rare occurrence. It will be a very rare occurrence. It is not during the voting. It will not, because that is not the culture of an average northerner. It may happen after the elections, after the results have been announced. Things may now get out of hands, but not during the conduct of the elections, because this is a social responsibility, and it is usually termed a religious responsibility that must not be flouted. So now, when you look at how it happened in the north and how it happened in the south world, you begin to ask questions. Why should we make elections do or die affairs? I saw a couple of video clips that were shared on social media platform, and majority of it that involves violence were from the south. From the south. Can't we just conduct our elections peacefully? Very few instances, like the one mentioned by Mr. Nelson, is where you have a very coordinated affairs. Okay, we have seen what you did. Now, what you want to tell Nigerians? I saw one that was thrown in the park, the place in school area, Lagos, and I was like, oh, really? So these people can be this peaceful without resorting to violence. In the northern part, violence is only, you talk about violence probably when it has so much to do with religious infiltration or infringement or whatever. Otherwise, you don't really find northerners fighting on election day. They will exercise that responsibility until the outcome now starts the violence. Otherwise, this is not the nature of an average northerner when it comes to electoral conduct of elections.
Well, well said, Bashir Badr, a lawyer and political analyst who's with us here this morning. We've taken a look at a lot of things so far, so good if you just tuned in. This is News Central, and we are taking you through the Ballot Nigeria just the day after the elections, and like many would say, the music is still on because most definitely everyone will be looking forward to hear what the results are, especially in different wards and most importantly in different states. 36 states it is, well, you could say, and some of the results are already trickling in bits and pieces. But however, we must take time to announce to you here on News Central that you might want to be very, very careful of misinformation and disinformation, because some of the information you would find on social media spaces like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, some of these results or tweets or messages may stand to be a misinformation or disinformation. Don't forget that a lot of persons will be hiding under the edges of a political umbrella or party just to ensure that they can push the narratives or change it. So we are indeed imploring you to ensure that you stick to us, stay here on News Central, and like we've told you, a few minutes from here, we'll be joined in Abuja by one of our correspondents. And most importantly, also, we'll join INEC, who will be speaking to us pretty soon. In the meantime, Rita, we've discussed with our guests, we've taken a look at different outcomes. Election violence has been in discussion, integrity as well has equally been in discussion, and not forgetting to the beavers' effectiveness as well. That's another thing that we've discussed about.
Definitely another thing we've discussed about. And just for the last bit, before we go for a very quick break, Bashir, now there were situations where on the INEC ballot paper, you know, we talked about the fact that there is more importance in the presidential election than in the National Assembly election, that is the Senate and the House of Representatives. In some places now where the ballot papers had finished, or they could not even find the names of the House of Representatives candidates. I mean, what would you say, or how would you assess that particular situation?
If these are administrative errors on the part of INEC, definitely INEC will look at it, and if there is where there is need to conduct a re-election or to conduct the election in those units, definitely INEC will take care of that. We still have a space of nobody knew that today will also be an election day. We were expecting results today, but today is also an election day in 16 states. So INEC will do the needful where the bulk of these laps falls on their table. Then it is their responsibility to ensure that no single Nigerian, no single citizen of Nigeria who is eligible to vote is disenfranchised.
All right, thank you so much, Bashir. The word there is still stay calm. Please follow on INEC for the authentic result. As much as we appreciate the optimism, a lot of mobilization, a lot of people who are passionate about this election, let's not spread violence, let's not spread tension. Let us please remain calm. And of course, at here News Central TV, we will continue to give you live updates, analysis. We also have our people on ground, and INEC will also be giving you live updates from INEC on what the updates are for this particular election. Thank you so much, Bashir Badr, lawyer and political analyst, for joining us for this conversation, and also Nelson Ekujimi, who unfortunately left, but definitely will be joining us later, political analyst. Bashir Badr, you still be with us for this conversation. We'll take a quick break right now, and when we come back, of course, we have News Central now at 12 noon, so please stay with us.